You'll never be anything, Eleliana. Not today. Not ever. The words stuck to her skin like the morning heat, sharp, heavy, and impossible to shake off. She stepped deeper into the bush, her arms full of dry firewood, her shoulders aching under the weight. The smell of wet earth clung to her clothes, mingling with sweat and silence. Her eyes stung, not from the sun, but for what had happened earlier. The slap, the shouting, the same old story. Sandra had been especially cruel that morning. Useless girl, walking around here thinking you're somebody. Foolish child. Her mother had spat, hurling the insult like it burned her throat to say anything else. Then came the slap. Sharp. Final. Go fetch firewood. It's the only thing you're good for. Eleliana hadn't replied. What could she say that hadn't already been ignored, mocked, or punished? Her cheeks still throbbed. Her pride, too. She took a deep breath and tried to drown the thoughts in the rhythm of her steps. Left, right, left. The path through the bush was familiar. Comforting even. Out here, at least, the trees didn't talk back. She was 17. Her life, according to her mother, was already decided. But Eleliana wanted more. The village girls her age had long abandoned hope. Some sold plantings. Most sold themselves to the foreign oil workers near the mining site. But not her. No, never her. I'll be a doctor, she whispered to herself, a tremor in her voice. One day, I'll change this village. It sounded foolish even to her ears. But still she said it. Every time she walked this path, a vow whispered into the bush like a secret prayer. She didn't know how it would happen, only that it had to. Then she heard it, a groan. Low, strained. She paused. The wind? Maybe a goat? But it came again. Clearer now. Human. Weak. Hello, she called, her voice trembling. Silence. Then another groan. Closer. Her heart picked up speed. She pushed aside a thorny branch and stepped into the underbrush. There, lying half-hidden among the vines, was a man. He looked barely alive. His shirt was torn, stained with blood and dirt. His face was sunken, beard overgrown, like he'd been lost for days. His skin was pale, death pale. He was breathing, but just barely. Eleliana's breath caught in her throat. Oh my God! She dropped the firewood without thinking, knees hitting the damp earth as she knelt beside him. Sir, she whispered, can you hear me? His eyes flickered, barely opened. A cracked whisper escaped his lips. She unscrewed her small water flask and gently lifted his head, holding the flask to his lips. Drink, please. He swallowed, slowly, painfully. His hands twitched weakly at his sides. Then his eyes met hers. Confused, grateful, desperate. That look shattered something inside her. She didn't hesitate. Okay, I got you, she murmured, almost to herself. She looped his arm around her shoulder. He was much heavier than he looked, dead weight, limp and unresponsive. But Eleliana had carried firewood her whole life. Carried insults. Carried grief. What was one more burden? Gritting her teeth, she shifted him onto her back. His arms hung around her neck. His breath, shallow and hot, tickled her ear. Step by step, she carried him out of the bush. The village came into view, and the stairs began immediately. Mouths hung open. People froze. Who is that? Someone whispered. She's carrying a man? She's cursed, that girl. Touched by spirits. But Eleliana didn't stop. Her legs trembled. Her back screamed. Still, she kept walking. For him. For herself. At the clinic, the nurse ran out with wide eyes. Eliana. What in God's name? I found him in the bush, she gasped. Please, he needs help. The nurse hesitated. We don't have medicine. We're already stretched. Please, Eleliana interrupted. Take this. She pulled her old phone from her skirt pocket and placed it on the counter. Take it. Just please help him. The nurse stared at her, then at the man. She took the phone. I'll try, she said quietly. No promises. Eleliana watched them rush the man inside. Then she turned and ran back toward the bush, her sandals slapping the dirt path. She had to retrieve the firewood. If she returned home empty-handed, her mother's fury would be even worse. When she finally arrived, sweat-soaked and trembling, Sandra was waiting. Slap, where have you been? Carrying men through the village like a prostitute? Is that what you do now? I was helping someone. Sandra spat on the floor. Disgrace. You're no daughter of mine. Leliana didn't argue. She just sat on the floor and cried. Silent tears. She didn't even know why she was crying anymore. From exhaustion? Shame? Helplessness? That night, she lay on her mat, eyes wide open, staring at the moonlight streaking through the roof. What if he dies? Before the sun rose, she was already walking back to the clinic. The man was awake. He was sitting up, breathing, smiling. Leliana's feet froze in the doorway. You're alive, she said, barely above a whisper. He turned slowly. His voice was hoarse, but clear. Thanks to you. She stepped inside. You look different. I feel different. He smiled, then winced. I thought I was going to die out there. You almost did. Their eyes met. And for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Of pain, of survival. I didn't even know your name, she said. David, he replied. David Kalu. She blinked. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. Some politician? A businessman? Before she could ask more, the clinic's doctor entered and froze. Mr. Kalu? David looked up. Yes. The doctor's face turned pale. Sir, you're alive. Leliana turned sharply. Wait, sir. David glanced at her, then sighed. I was kidnapped on my way home from Lagos, he began. I escaped 2 nights ago. Walked for days. No food. No water. I thought I wouldn't make it. Leliana stared. A man dumped in the bush. Almost dead. Now, sitting here, telling a story that sounded like a movie. And then, the next sentence changed everything. I'm the CEO of Kalu Oil. Everything inside her went still. She had seen that name. In newspapers. On the internet. Her classmates used to joke about him. The invisible billionaire, they called him. Elusive. Powerful. Untouchable. And now he was sitting on a cot in her village's broken clinic because she carried him there. She had saved a billionaire's life. Her legs felt weak. David nodded gently. Yes. And you, Leliana, just changed everything. For the first time in her life, Leliana didn't feel invisible. But she wasn't ready for the weight of being seen. Not like this. Not with a billionaire saying she'd saved his life. Not with villagers whispering her name like it had suddenly gained value. Not with the nurse looking at her as if she were some rare, unexpected miracle. She stood in the clinic's corner, arms crossed tightly, staring at the man now sitting upright in the bed where he'd nearly died. David Kalu. The name rang again in her head like a bell she didn't know how to stop. She didn't know much about oil tycoons or big money, but even she had heard of Kalu Oil, whispered among villagers when fuel prices rose or when someone brought an old magazine back from Lagos. She'd seen his face once. Sharp jaw, serious eyes. Now here he was in the flesh, barely recovered, looking at her like she was the one worth noticing. I don't understand, Leliana said finally. Why would someone kidnap you? David's eyes narrowed with the kind of pain that made her chest tighten. Because I exist, he said, his voice low. Because money makes enemies. Because I was careless. He paused, as if the weight of those words still hung on his shoulders. Then he looked up. But you saw someone dying and didn't ask questions. You just helped. I didn't know who you were, she replied. I still don't know who you are. He smiled faintly. That's why it means something. The nurse returned, flustered, with her old phone in hand. It's for you. He asked us to give it back. Leliana took the device with numb fingers. It was cracked, smudged with fingerprints, but it still worked. Thank you, she mumbled. I'll need to make a call, David said, sitting up straighter now. My people will be searching. He dialed slowly, then pressed the phone to his ear. His voice shifted the moment someone answered, calm, precise, controlled. She only caught fragments. Yes, I'm alive. No, I can't explain. Forest Village, send the helicopter. Her breath caught. Helicopter? I'm sorry. Did you say helicopter? She asked, wide-eyed. David ended the call and nodded. They'll come. Soon. Leliana didn't reply. She wasn't sure what to say. No one in her village had ever seen a helicopter. Not even the chief. You still look like you don't believe me, he said. I don't know what to believe. A moment passed. I'll show you, he said. The sound arrived first, a low, rhythmic thudding from the sky. Then the dust began to rise, swirling through the village in a hot, dry wind. Children screamed. Goats scattered. Men ran to the edge of the field. And then it appeared, a helicopter, silver and black, slicing through the sky like a machine from a dream. It hovered once, then descended slowly into the clearing beside the clinic. Leliana stood frozen, her heart pounding like it wanted to leap from her chest. She'd seen helicopters in films once, borrowed from a neighbor with a tiny battery-powered TV. But to see one up close, the roar, the wind, the pure power of it, was something else entirely. The villagers gathered, eyes wide, mouths open. The side door opened. Out stepped a woman in a sharp navy suit, dark glasses hiding her eyes, a clipboard in hand. She looked entirely out of place here, like someone dropped from a different planet. "We're here for Mr. David Kalu," she announced, raising her voice above the noise. People gasped. The nurse stumbled back. "It's true," she whispered. He wasn't lying. David stepped out from the clinic with slow, steady steps. He looked better already. Straighter, stronger. The wind from the blades caught the hem of his shirt as he moved forward. But he didn't go straight to the helicopter. He went to her, to Leliana, and in front of the entire village, he bowed. "Thank you," he said, his voice clear despite the noise. "This girl saved my life." The crowd fell into silence. Then murmurs. Then gasps. Then something new. A kind of awe. Sandra, standing at the entrance of their home, looked like the earth had opened beneath her feet. David turned to her. "Are you her mother?" he asked. Sandra swallowed. "Yes." "Then I have something to say to you." They walked together, villagers trailing behind like ghosts. When David reached the doorstep, Sandra stood as still as stone. "You don't know me," he said, "but your daughter does. And she saved me." Sandra said nothing. Her lips pressed tight. David continued. "She gave me water when no one else would. She carried me when I couldn't stand. She traded her phone so I could get treated." He turned to Leliana. "And I've never owed anyone more." Sandra's face was unreadable. "I want to repay that debt," he added. "Not just with money, but with opportunity." He nodded at the assistant, who stepped forward and placed a thick envelope in Sandra's hands. "A new house, a clinic, a school, water for the village, and your daughter's full education, anywhere in the world." Sandra blinked. "What?" "She'll become the doctor she dreamed of being." Leliana's knees nearly gave out. "But why?" Sandra whispered. "Why do all this?" David looked at Leliana, and his answer came without hesitation. "Because she didn't look at me and see a burden. She saw a person." The helicopter lifted off minutes later, taking David with it. The village watched in stunned silence as it vanished into the sky. When it was gone and the dust had settled, Leliana turned to see her mother still standing on the porch. But her face wasn't angry. It wasn't proud either. It was something else. Lost. That night, Sandra didn't speak during dinner. She didn't lecture. She didn't slap. She just watched her daughter, the way one watches something fragile and unexplainable. Then, after the dishes had been cleared and the lamps extinguished, she walked into Leliana's room and knelt beside her bed. "I'm sorry," she said. Leliana sat up. "I thought you were wasting time. I thought dreaming was dangerous. I didn't want to watch you break like I did." Her voice trembled. "But you didn't break." "I almost did," Leliana whispered. "But I kept walking." Sandra reached for her hand. "I'm glad you did." And for the first time in years, mother and daughter sat together without anger between them. Only truth, and a little bit of awe. Days passed, but the village still buzzed like a disturbed beehive. People whispered when Leliana walked by. Heads turned, greetings came with nervous smiles. The same women who once rolled their eyes at her now offered leftover stew. The same boys who used to call her bush bookworm suddenly asked if she'd teach them English. But Leliana didn't feel changed. Not yet. She still woke at dawn, still washed her clothes in the stream, still packed rice and salt into an old cloth for her mother. The only difference was the envelope, thick and heavy, like it might burn a hole through her hands. She hadn't opened it. Not fully. A part of her was afraid it wasn't real. That David Kalu, the David Kalu, had flown off into the sky and left behind a dream she wasn't meant to touch. But the truth came crashing in the following week, when a large black SUV rolled into the village, sending chickens scattering and children screaming with delight. Three men stepped out, all in dark suits. They carried tools and blueprints. One of them approached her shyly. "Are you Miss Leliana?" She nodded. "We're here to begin construction. The house, the water project, school, clinic. It was real. It was all happening." They handed her a letter, this one marked with gold-embossed letters, Kalu Enterprises. Inside, folded neatly next to the building plans, was a personal note. "Dear Leliana, this is only the beginning. I meant what I said. Your act of kindness was not small. It was life-changing. For me. And now, I want to change your life in return. Please find and enclose your full scholarship letter. You've been accepted into one of the top medical universities. All expenses, tuition, housing, travel will be covered. You have a gift, a light. Don't let the past dim it. Believe in yourself the way you believed in a stranger. Warm regards, David Kalu." Leliana sat under the mango tree, staring at the letter in her lap. A scholarship, a real university, a real chance. "Mama," she whispered, running inside with the letter shaking in her hands. "Mama, look." Sandra, who had just finished boiling water for cassava, took the paper with trembling fingers. She read slowly, her lips moving with each word. She looked up. "So, you're going to school?" Leliana nodded, too breathless to speak. "Outside this village?" Another nod. Sandra sat down slowly. "I never imagined, never dreamed." There was something in her eyes. Regret, pride, fear. But she smiled. A real smile. "I was wrong," she said again. "I thought you were just wasting time. That books couldn't change anything." But now, her voice trailed off. And for the first time, mother and daughter looked at each other without shame. Only wonder. Weeks turned into months. The village transformed before their eyes. A new house rose where the old mud one once stood. Wide windows, a tiled roof, running water. For the first time, Leliana had her own room. Her own bed, clean sheets, electricity, a desk. She cried the night she first turned on a lamp. Then came the boreholes, 10 of them, drilled by men in helmets who spoke little but worked hard. Women no longer walked miles for water. Children bathed without buckets. Life felt possible. The school followed, white-walled, blue-roofed, smelling of new chalk and paint. The clinic was rebuilt too, with real medicine, beds with mattresses, and nurses trained in Lagos. And all the while, Leliana waited for the day she'd leave. The day her life would begin again. It came quietly. No drums. No ceremonies. Just a bus waiting at the edge of the village and a suitcase by the door. Sandra packed her daughter's things with trembling hands. "You have everything?" she asked for the 10th time. "Yes, Mama." "Money? The letters? Your ID?" "Yes, Mama." Sandra paused, then hugged her tightly. "If you ever get lonely, just remember you didn't leave nothing behind. You left a legacy already." Tears slipped from both their eyes. The bus ride to Lagos was long. Bumpy roads, endless trees, and the thrum of uncertainty pounding in her chest. Leliana sat by the window, watching the past slip behind her and the future rise like a mountain ahead. She thought about the bush, about David's pale face. How one moment had changed everything. Lagos was chaos and wonder all at once. Tall buildings scratched the sky. People moved like rivers, fast, loud, unstoppable. The air smelled like fuel, sweat, and fried plantain. Her taxi dropped her at the university gates. They loomed large like a monument. She stood there, suitcase in hand, heart thumping in her chest. "Am I really here?" she whispered. Inside, students bustled past, confident, stylish, holding fancy phones and laughing like they owned the world. She felt invisible again, like the village girl with dirt under her nails and fear in her bones. But then she remembered what David had written. Believe in yourself the way you believed in a stranger. So she straightened her back and walked in. University life was a whirlwind. Lectures, labs, late nights, long readings. Constant doubt. She tried to blend in, studied hard, listened carefully, avoided attention. But she always felt a step behind. Her accent, her clothes, her silence. She didn't have rich parents, didn't go to private schools, didn't know how to flirt or network or pretend. There were days she cried into her pillow, nights she thought of quitting, but she didn't, because somewhere in Lagos, a man she'd found in the bush had believed in her, and that belief carried her through. One evening, just as she finished reviewing anatomy diagrams for an upcoming exam, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then opened the message. Liliana, this is David. I hope you're well. I know school must be hard, but I believe in you. You're stronger than you know. Keep going. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't know how he always knew the right moment to reach out, but it gave her just enough strength to continue. She wrote back, "Thank you. I won't let you down." By the time her second year arrived, Liliana had learned how to hide the fear. She spoke less with hesitation and more with clarity. Her notes were organized, her white coat pressed. She moved through the hallways with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned her place. Not by birth, not by money, but by sheer will. Still, there were moments. Moments when the girls in her class laughed over champagne brunches she couldn't afford. Moments when she sat alone in the dining hall, pretending not to mind. Moments when the weight of expectation crushed her chest. Not just from the school, but from home, from David, from herself. Every time she walked into a hospital room or scrubbed in for a lab, she saw the face of that dying man in the bush, pale, broken, breathing through cracked lips. If I could help him, I can help others too. That thought kept her going. It was during a surgical rotation that something changed. The professor, a stern, silver-haired man with a reputation for dismissing quiet students, stopped beside her table. He barked, "Read this scan." The others held their breath. Liliana didn't flinch. She leaned forward, adjusted the light box, and calmly walked him through the diagnosis, using correct terminology, proper logic, and not a single unnecessary word. When she finished, the professor blinked once, then nodded. "Well done." That was it. No applause, no smile, just 2 words. But they were everything. Later that evening, in the silence of her dorm room, she allowed herself to smile for the first time in days. By the middle of her 3rd year, she was no longer the village girl who'd come with only a suitcase and a fragile dream. She was a student leader, part of a volunteer medical outreach program. She gave shots to babies, stitched wounds in local communities, and listened with care to patients who looked just like her mother, worn but hopeful. The media took notice. Photos appeared in university newsletters, captions reading, "Future of Nigerian Medicine, Liliana Sandra Kalu." She hadn't taken his name, but people had given it to her anyway. And deep down, she didn't hate it. Letters from home came rarely, but when they did, they were filled with warmth. Sandra had changed, not entirely, not suddenly, but steadily. "Your school is shining in this house," one letter read. "Everyone comes to our door just to ask if you are real." She'd included a photo. Sandra is standing in front of their new home, smiling awkwardly, wearing the same head wrap she once used to curse her daughter's ambition. Liliana pinned it to her wall, right above her stethoscope. Then came the invitation. A private event. Black tie. Formal. Kalu Oil's 25th anniversary celebration. David's assistant had sent the email personally, with a note at the bottom. "Mr. Kalu requests your presence." He would be honored. She stared at it for a long time. They hadn't seen each other since the day he left her village. She didn't even know what she'd say. What could she say? Still, she typed a reply. "I'll be there." The night of the event, she wore a simple black dress. No glitter, no sequins. Just clean lines and elegance. Her heels were borrowed. Her makeup was minimal. But when she stepped into the glass ballroom overlooking the city skyline, heads turned. Not because of what she wore, but because of how she walked. David found her near the buffet table, a glass of water in her hand, eyes scanning the city below. "Don't like crowds?" he asked. She turned, startled, and there he was. Older, maybe. A few more creases in his face. But still, David. Still the man she'd carried on her back when the world was trying to kill him. "I like silence," she replied, smiling. He chuckled. Me too. They stood there for a while, just looking out. Then he said, I've been watching your progress. I noticed, she said softly. Your messages always come the right time. You look like someone who might quit, he said, teasing. I wanted to, she admitted. But you didn't. No, she said, because you didn't. He paused, then nodded. You've become someone, he said. I think I always was, she replied. I just needed someone to see it. Their eyes met. And for the first time, they weren't just survivor and savior. They were equals. Back at school, something in her had shifted. The girl who once whispered her dreams into the trees was now standing on stages, giving talks, guiding younger students. She had become a voice. Not loud, but clear, and others listened. One night, during a break, she received another message. From David. The foundation has launched. It's named after you. Scholarships for rural girls who want to become doctors. The first recipient asked if you'd mentor her. Aleliana stared at the screen. The girl who once had nothing was now someone's answer. She replied, yes, I'd be honored. But with the highs came questions. At night, when the city lights faded and the applause died down, she asked herself, why me? What if I fail? What does he expect in return? She hadn't asked for this life. She'd only given water to a stranger. But now she was carrying more than a man. She was carrying hope, expectation, legacy. It scared her, but also drove her. Her final year approached, and with it, pressure she couldn't always carry. Late nights turned into all-nighters. Her body grew thinner, her mind sharper, but her heart sometimes ached. Until another message came. Aleliana, you're almost there. You've already made a difference. Don't stop now. She stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, I won't. Rain began the day she graduated. Not heavy, not loud, just soft and steady, as if the sky itself had decided to pause and breathe with her. Aleliana stood in front of the mirror in her dorm room, fastening the final button of her white medical coat, her hands trembling. She had dreamed of this day for so long, and yet, now that it was here, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like something real, earned. Her name was stitched into the fabric over her heart. Dr. Aleliana S. Okoro. Not Kalu. Not yet. But the world had started adding that anyway, in articles, on posters, and whispers. Outside, the campus buzzed. Students ran between buildings in robes and gowns, hugging each other, crying, shouting into the drizzle. The ceremony was minutes away, but she needed stillness first. Aleliana walked slowly to the window and looked out. Lagos stretched beyond the university gates, fast, restless, wide. It no longer scared her. In many ways, it had become her, loud in ambition, relentless in pressure, and finally promising. Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from David. Today is yours. I'll be in the back. No spotlight, just a proud witness. She smiled. Somehow, he always knew when to say the exact thing she needed. The ceremony filled the auditorium with noise and nerves. Parents squeezed into tight seats, professors lined up in front rows, cameras clicked, flowers wilted in hot hands. Aleliana sat among the top students, back straight, face calm, heart racing. One by one, names were called. Then came hers. Dr. Aleliana Sandra Okoro. The applause wasn't normal. It swelled, spread, until it became a standing ovation. Not just for her grades, not just for her persistence, but because her story had already traveled far and wide. The girl from the bush who saved a stranger. The girl who became a doctor because she believed in kindness. The girl who carried a billionaire and carried herself all the way here. As she took the stage, her eyes scanned the crowd and found him, David, standing at the very back. No suit, no entourage, just a quiet smile, eyes proud. She held his gaze, gave a small nod, then turned to accept her certificate. It felt like the final step of a journey that had begun in mud and pain. But she knew better. This wasn't an ending. It was the start of something else. Later that evening, back at her dorm, she packed slowly. Her clothes, textbooks, little keepsakes, all folded with care. Each item a reminder of how far she'd come. There was a knock on the door. When she opened it, David stood there. I figured you'd still be here, he said. I'm almost done. He handed her a box. Inside was a stethoscope. sleek, silver, her name engraved on it. She ran her fingers over the letters. "Thank you." "No," he said. "Thank you." They sat on the bed, facing each other like old friends who had nothing left to hide. "I was going to disappear," he admitted. "After the incident, sell the company, move to Europe. But you made me believe in people again. You make it sound like I healed you." "You did." Liliana laughed quietly. "And you changed my life." He nodded. "It was never charity. It was recognition." She looked at him. "What now?" "I want to bring you into the foundation," he said. "Not just as a face, as a force. Help us build clinics across the country. Train rural health workers. Mentor girls like you once were." Her heart skipped. "I want that. But I also want to go back. To my village. Just for a while." "You should." They sat in silence for a moment longer. Then he reached into his pocket. Another envelope. "And one more thing." Inside was a plane ticket. "To Geneva. You've been invited to speak at the World Health Youth Summit," he said. "They read your story. They want you to tell it." Liliana's breath caught. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "You've been ready since the day you lifted me." She smiled. "You always say things like that. Because they're true." A week later, she stood at a podium in Switzerland, surrounded by students, doctors, diplomats. Her voice, though still soft, carried through the room like wind through trees. "I was just a girl," she said, "carrying firewood, trying to survive. I didn't save a man because I thought I'd be rewarded. I saved him because I saw a human being in pain. And sometimes that's enough." People cried. People clapped. But more importantly, people listened. She returned to Nigeria with a fire in her chest. The foundation opened 5 clinics within the first year. She visited each one, taught, listened, lifted spirits. She traveled from state to state, always returning to her roots. Then, one quiet morning, she went home, back to the village. The road was paved now, the houses painted, boreholes running. When she stepped out of the car, barefoot by choice, the children ran to her shouting, "Doctor! Doctor!" She smiled, picked up a small girl, and twirled her around. Sandra stood at the doorway of their house, a modern structure now, but still warm, still home. She wore a blue wrapper, her hands wiping tears that never seemed to stop whenever she saw her daughter return. "You look taller," she said. "You look younger." They laughed, hugged, cried into each other's shoulders. Later that evening, under the stars, they sat outside, sharing roasted corn and stories. "I remember the day you left," Sanders said. "I thought I'd never see you again. I almost didn't come back." "Why did you?" "Because I owe this place everything. The pain, the strength, the roots. It made me." Sandra looked at her daughter, not just with pride, but with awe. "You carried a man once," she said. "I've been carrying a lot more ever since." 1 year later, a school opened behind the clinic. The plaque read, "The Liliana S. Girls Academy, where kindness becomes strength." And above it flew a flag, not of any nation, but of hope. She continued her work, across borders, across villages, across hearts. And every time someone asked her how she got here, she told the same story. Not of glory, but of choice. "I chose to care," she'd say. "That's how everything changed." Years later, an article in a major international health journal called her the girl who carried a billionaire. Another called her the woman who carried a generation. But those were headlines. She didn't care much for them. What mattered to her was this. Somewhere in a small village, a girl who once thought she was invisible now stood tall. Not just in her name, not just in her title, but in her truth. She had carried a man, then a dream, then a legacy, and now she carried the future, all with hands that once only knew how to gather firewood.